Well, I'll give you guys a 1 second intro on me. I started my career at 24, just after graduating from college. I created a vodka brand. I wanted to be the first single bottle infused vodka with fruit in the bottle. We did that for almost 12 years. I launched a whiskey company called Broken Barrel Whiskey. You may have seen me on Instagram smashing barrels with a sledgehammer in a parking lot for years and years and years. That was quite fun. And then I went on to start a company called Badwater Brands, where I consult and help people go from an idea to product that is produced, ready to go to market. And most recently, that led me to a role with ASM Capital, which is American Single Malt Capital. It is a fund that is raising a tremendous amount of money to buy single malt whiskey and produce brands. So my role with them is quite unique in that I am going to be producing single malt whiskey brands domestically and globally for the company and putting those casks to good use. So without further ado, where American whiskey goes from here. As many of you know, American whiskey has faced some challenges. I will hit you guys with the bad news first. Whiskey sales are down 1.8% year over year. That can be quite a large amount of volume, given that American whiskey is one of the largest spirit categories next to vodka and tequila. Right now, there are 46% more barrels aging than just in 2020. So you're looking at 14 million barrels of aging whiskey. Fewer barrels are getting dumped, and it is a growing amount of inventory that is sitting unsold in the bulk whiskey market, which is a huge part of the whiskey market relative to things like liqueurs or other, produced and ready and sold products. Whiskey has a whole second life to it, which is the bulk whiskey market and the barrel market. There have been a lot of closures. If you have seen an article from the Lexington Herald, for example, which there have been many in the past few weeks even, of unpaid bills, lawsuits, closures, liens against companies, it ain't great for some of the larger, more prominent production facilities that have banked on producing whiskey for the bulk market and for co-packers and what we call NDPs or non-distilling producers. There have been some bad actors in the UK, especially. There's been a lot of articles that have come out about whiskey cask investment companies. I'm one to talk, now working for one, but I'll explain why it's different in a minute. But there have been a few people that have snuck in and effectively have lied and stolen and cheated on the back of the growing value of a whiskey barrel from inception. So a new make whiskey barrel through its increased value over years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, when those barrels would then be dumped and put into a product. It can sound like a lot of doom and gloom. Everything I just said is not encouraging whatsoever. Fear not. There have been, just in the last 100 days, 3 major acquisitions of whiskey companies in the US alone. You have Purple Brands that acquired Savage & Cook in Northern California. They also run the company Redwood Empire. Loch Lomond Group just bought here in New York Distilling Company. And some of my friends over at Middle West just acquired Old Elk, which is a non-distilling producer as well. Things are happening in the whiskey world. You could choose to look at the negative, or you can turn and choose to look at the positive. And when things aren't selling, it is a buyer's market, and there's a lot of value to be created. So what I really want to get into today is what are the drivers that are going to make American whiskey flourish in the next 5 years? Where will we be in 2030? It's a big world, and when you start to think about export, so few brands in the US are focusing, especially in whiskey, in export. When you go abroad, a lot of this is from just personal experience of traveling. So few bourbon brands, so few rye brands out there in the world relative to what we have here on our shelves in America. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of SKUs on the shelf. It's massive, it's prolific. When you get out into the world, there are so few of that, but people know about it. The internet and social media has shared a lot of these brands, innovation, rarity, unique products that have come out and actually are now available. There are more ways to access those, and there are more opportunities to get in touch with distributors than ever before. Some of these things are as quick as a LinkedIn message or a social media direct message to importers and exporters. So I highly encourage anybody that is working in or considering working in the American whiskey market to think about brands. I give the example, it's a vodka example, but there's a brand that you see called Monopoloa. They do over 700,000 cases in the US. There ain't a single person working for Monopoloa that's showing up doing a tasting or anything like that. They're based in Poland, and so it's one of those things where you have brands. There are export opportunities to do massive volume in countries where you may not think to go. Now, I want to make a big distinction between differentiation and innovation. They are not the same. Differentiating yourself from your competitors and innovating in the category are two very, very different things. I'm probably going to run out of time, so I can go fast. Differentiation can be as simple as packaging, marketing, message, voice, how you speak to your consumer, understanding who your consumer truly is, and how you can differentiate from one bourbon to the next, one rye to the next. A great resource actually from Park Street University would be to go look up Maurice, the former CEO of Compass Box, did a great piece on innovation and what is good innovation versus dull innovation. The example of innovation that I can give is that when everyone was doing a lot of cask finishing, I felt it was very important to break out in what cask finishing could be. So in 2019, we were smashing barrels with sledgehammers and doing multi-cask stave finishing for Broken Barrel whiskey, which was a really fun and exciting way. We won Most Innovative Whiskey in America at the American Whiskey Awards in 2023 for doing something like that. So how you present yourself to your consumer and market your brand can be a very different way of innovating, from a process to a place to a grain to a type of cask, a blend of casks, those types of innovations. And don't assume they're going to know. Consumers will not know unless you tell them. They believe what they read, and they trust inherently what's on the packaging. So if you're doing something innovative, don't shy away from stating that and putting that on your packaging. There are emerging whiskey categories. For the first time in 50 years, we had a new category ratified with the federal government for American single malt whiskey. This is a massive deal. This is a big deal. It puts us on a global stage. If you go back to point one about now the entire world knows exactly what they're getting when an American whiskey says single malt whiskey. It was the Wild West before that, no pun intended. But it's an amazing thing to have that. And so that's a huge boost and gain in the American whiskey category to have single malt whiskey. It's one of the reasons I'm jumping into it with that ratification in December. It's a huge new way to kind of market and go about. American whiskey on its own has so many levers you can pull. Bourbon whiskey is limited to new charred white oak barrels. The amount of differentiation you can do with single malt with used casks and even just malt bills, not mash bills, where you can differentiate between chocolate malt and pale malt, distiller's malt, and so on and so on. And premiumization can also come from things like storytelling. So I'll give one example of a client I'm working with who gave me MGP, Bardstown Bourbon Company, and Green River barrels to blend. The most common whiskey barrels on the open market, period. So what I did is came up with a Tri-County 4-grain blend as part of the main part of the label to say, listen, let's tell a different story with these different whiskey barrels. Trends that are going to push whiskey forward can include, trends that will push us forward are going to be things, it's 5% year over year from American whiskey is going to be 2030. We're looking at that kind of growth. And in terms of value, right now whiskey barrels are as cheap as they can possibly be. I've been getting emails and offers for whiskey barrels at 5-year-old barrels for under $1,000 a barrel, when that same barrel 5 years ago might have been $5,000. What that means is that a producer that wants to get into American whiskey today, they can actually go out and put a very well-priced, high-value product on the market at a ridiculously low cost relative to what you might have paid for that same product just 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So in that sense, if you think about value to the consumer, there's so much that can be done with the availability and the prolific amount of barrels and barrel types and casks that are on the open market. So if you are in the non-distilling producing category, there's a tremendous value right now. It is a great time to be buying whiskey rather than making whiskey per se. And that's just in the immediate future. I think that will change, and we're going to actually kind of resurface out of that, which is why there's that projected 5% growth in the next few years. I love transparency. I am a big supporter of putting everything on the label, maybe to a fault. My labels have generally been pretty wordy and text-heavy. I've seen great brands that have little to no text. One of my favorite wines is Saldo, which just has the word Saldo on the front and nothing else. So it can be pretty widespread, but I do love authenticity, transparency. That doesn't have to be in the packaging. It can be on your messaging, social media. It can be in your website. It can be in the people you employ and how they are trained and educated on the product so they can tell every little detail about where the products come from. And then as far as social media and direct-to-consumer, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to connect with people in a way like never before. There's more platforms. There's more access. Find your audience. One example I give, I'm working with a company called Find Familiars, and they work with the direct-to-consumer only. It's all online, and they sold 5,000 bottles in a day of their Paladin whiskey, which is geared towards Dungeons and Dragons audience, believe it or not. So find your audience, find your activation crew. Maybe it's soccer fans, maybe it's gamblers, maybe it's cigar people. Whatever your audience is, if you can reach them in an authentic, transparent way, there is opportunity in American whiskey to find those groups. I never would have thought Dungeons and Dragons people would be into cask strength, high proof, rare whiskey, and yet they're buying thousands of bottles with a click of a button online, and they're on their 12th or 13th barrel release, and they're selling thousands and thousands of bottles through that channel. It's really interesting, and I think one of my big ideas, I'll throw this out to the crowd, is esports. How do we get the millions and millions of fans that love esports that are not kids? They're much older than you would think. How do you access an audience like that? So, and again, this maybe is a little more broad reaching than just American whiskey, but it is a far-reaching way of thinking about just spirits in general. And as far as the future, I am optimistic. I think there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to how you can innovate, differentiate, go for push the boundaries and borders and go further and farther to reach more and more people. There is so much out there, and I want people to walk away from this thinking, wow, I'll talk to Seth about how we can do more with American whiskey. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate your time. You can find me on LinkedIn. And yeah.